Hi guys, welcome to episode 23 of The Green Room. I am joined once again by James. James, hello.
Hi Nick, how are we?
I am not too bad at all.
Good. We got anyone else here today?
We have Harry.
Hi there.
Hi Harry.
How are you?
Very good, how are you?
Not too bad, glad it's Friday.
Excellent.
Aren't we all?
We've got a special guest underneath us, Rufus, Jim's dog.
Yeah, my dog's here. So at the moment he's being quiet, but he may just not be in a minute.
Watchers of the YouTube might recognise him from the front of your coffee mug most days.
Yes, no, I do have him on my coffee mug. I'm a big fan of my dog. Moving completely off dogs, how is everyone?
I'm very well. I'm actually extremely happy. Just want to say thanks to all of our viewers on YouTube because we hit over 500 subscribers. So keep them coming. If you like what we do, hit the subscribe button. There's also a little bell there. So if you click on that, then every time we launch a video, you'll get a little notification on your email or on your phone or device.
But what about people who aren't watching us? How else would you listen to us?
Maybe you can explain that.
Okay, fine, I'll explain. So this is a podcast. So in theory, when you talk about videos, I know you're big on YouTube, but really, you should be listening to our dulcet tones while travelling in the car or doing something else.
That's the safest way, obviously, if you're travelling.
Yes. So in order to do that, you head over to the Green Edge website, and at the top of the Green Edge website, there is a little button that says podcast. It says our podcast, in fact, and you click on that. And then there are various mechanisms by which you can stream what we're doing. So we have Apple Podcasts, we have Spotify, we have Stitcher, and we have TuneIn Radio.
Yeah.
And our podcast is hosted by Podbean, so you can even go there and listen to it and get other very interesting podcasts. I've said our podcast is very interesting. I hope people find it interesting. Maybe I've elevated ourselves slightly higher than we should be, but anyway. What are we talking about today?
So we're just going to talk about ways we can reverse the effects of climate change. So going to be some quite interesting little topics and.
Okay, fine. So this is basically a list pulled together by a group of scholars and scientists and entrepreneurs and other sorts. And basically they came up with a big list of how many were in the total list?
There's 100 in the total list.
100 things that could do to reverse climate change. And essentially, when it's talking about climate change, we're focusing specifically on greenhouse gases. So the plan is we're going to kind of go through a few of them.
We should mention the name of the list. It's called Project Drawdown.
Project Drawdown.
Yeah.
Wow, that is a catchy
title. And was it like a UN sponsored thing, or was it just?
It's a non-profit organisation made up of people from 22 different countries. And there's loads of different scientists, really high up people and climate activists and stuff, but all with the aim of kind of reversing the effects of greenhouse gases. So they don't actually enact anything. What they do is they put together this list and then they push for governments to do something with it.
Should we, going through it, do you think we should throw a little spanner in the works here? Do you think we should do a countdown to the biggest thing?
You want to go 10 to 1?
Which is interesting because I've stolen your notes here and it's definitely the other order.
It's 1 to 10. Yeah, let's go 10 to 1.
So then we can announce, then 100 to 90, 100 to 10 are boring. Yeah? So it's mainly the top 10. 100 to 11, should I say. So top 10 we're going to start. So, yeah? You like this?
Yeah.
You like this way of doing it?
Very good.
So the 10th best way, should we fly through any of between 11 and 100?
We'll put a link to it on.
You read them at your leisure. Okay.
They're very interesting.
So number 10, the 10th best way to cut climate change is rooftop solar. So producing electricity from sunlight, which actually comes as no surprise at all. It's made the top 10. Would you say?
Yeah, I'm surprised by solar being kind of so high on the list.
So we talked about in previous episodes. It's what, apart from the concentrated solar, in terms of solar PV technology, rooftop solar is the most efficient way of using solar PV energy. In a kind of most economical way. So yeah.
But at the moment about 0.4% of our electricity comes from solar PV, and that's globally. but they reckon by 2050 that could be up to 7%.
See, this is one of the things. So the way that they've done Project Drawdown is fascinating. They use loads of experts and everything, but all their kind of results are based on where we could/should be by 2050.
Which is good, because that coincides with our government's own aims to make us carbon neutral.
Exactly. And they also put finances on there, which are very, very interesting. But one of the things they have on there, from 0.4%, which, to be fair, I think was in 2050, it might be a little bit more now, but 7% in 2050, that's very ambitious.
Is it?
Don't you think?
No.
I don't think so. 7%?
Yeah.
That's going to be a hell of a lot of roofs.
Yeah. But they're not going to be here. And they're not going to be in the UK. I'm not being NIMBY here, but the weather's crap. Right? I mean, they're going to be in sensible places where the sun actually shines.
The other assumption they've made is that the price will continue to drastically fall. I mean, we all know that solar's gotten a lot more economical, but they're definitely banking on it continuing like that.
Well, let's go through the figures, yeah? So for rooftop solar, according to this study, so they think if it gets to the 7% as you talked about, it will reduce CO2 emissions by 24.6 gigatons.
Gigatons.
Sorry, I'm sounding a bit like...
it's not J with a J.
Yeah.
It's G with a G.
I'm sounding like Back to the Future.
With a key.
Is this because I'm a massive Back to the Future fan? Yeah.
You're fine.
So it completely justifies it.
Okay.
Flux capacitor on here.
Right.
So, but cost-wise, $453 billion. It's like Austin Powers moment. That is a serious amount of cash. However...
Almost $500 billion, isn't it?
Almost $500 billion. However, the savings are $3.5 trillion. So,
All the money here is in US dollars. That's how they published the study.
yeah.
When
it's one-to-one parity with the pound,
but
makes
what's the saving? Is this the kind of the effects of if it hadn't been in place, this is what the cost of the CO2 would
Exactly.
be to the...
It's more to do with the cost of how we'd make the energy otherwise.
Right.
So again, one of the reasons that's so high is that they count on it falling by quite a lot. The estimation is that at the moment, or when the study was published a couple of years ago, it was at about $1,800 per kilowatt. Whereas they estimate it'll be 600.
So they think it'll be cheaper.
So they think it'll be a third cheaper.
Yeah,
basically
by 2050
to install it.
Okay.
And I think at that stage, then tariffs, where we have tariffs to encourage people. Do I mean tariffs?
Yeah. Well, we had the feed-in tariff, and what are we about to have?
A seg.
Export guarantee.
Fine. But
that's our remembrance.
But then wouldn't that be good if we didn't need
acronym.
them?
Yeah.
Was that my acronym?
Yes.
God. It feels like it's been a long week. I don't know
seg.
what's happened. Anyway, right, so 10, rooftop solar. Okay, so we're going for ways that are better than rooftop solar.
So by rooftop solar as well, what we mean is pretty much domestic solar. It's the ones that you have on your roof at home, not the...
Right, I'm excited about Nick telling me about number 9.
Silver pasture. Is that how you pronounce it?
What is silver pasture?
Had either of you heard of it before you read it?
I think this is when you laughed at me when I showed you that video.
Right.
Of that.
That desert thing.
Yes.
Oh, God.
Because basically, I don't know what the name of the scientist is. It's quite a famous. Organisation. So where it's a fella who, obviously as a zoologist, spent most of his time in Africa.
Fellow zoologist.
He spent most of his time in Africa, and in I think the 60s or 70s, he was advising the kind of African governments at the time about the best ways to control the elephant population, and he suggested like a massive cull of the elephants. To what he said afterwards was the biggest regret he ever he had to deal with. So as one of his things to kind of readdress that, he wanted to kind of solve this problem of desertification in the sub-Saharan parts of the world, where basically when it happens, it just really affects the communities, because every year the crop yields go down, the land just gets worse and worse, and people have to migrate because they can't grow enough food for themselves. So what he did then with his study, he followed. Because he looked at the past and looked at where desertification had happened all around the world, and he found that where the kind of large stocks of wild animals, where they used to kind of just graze and then they poo, and basically just go somewhere else and just do the whole thing again. So it's kind of called group grazing, but by these animals. That actually was responsible for refertilizing the land. So when people got rid of buffalo and kind of large herds of animals like that, the land itself got worse and worse because that process was affected.
So it makes sense. So basically, instead of using organic fertilizers, use nature fertilizer.
It's all to do with management of land. The silver pasture thing is slightly different, but it's all to do with kind of how we use our livestock, given that we know that they're.
So they've got to mimic basically what the animals like the buffalo or the.
No, not really.
No,
not really. This is basically where you have trees and that sort of thing. You also have animals.
Or where you have animals, you also plant trees and whatnot. Pastures with trees will take in about 5 to 10 times as much carbon, storing it in soil as well as in all your biomass, your trees, your plants.
But what it means is there are benefits for farmers and that sort of thing, because obviously you tend to have things. For example, I have my raised garden, my raised bed, where I grow my vegetables, and things become ripe at different times. And so if you have your animals and you have your trees and plants and all that sort of stuff, it tends to give the produce at different times. So that's useful for them because it slightly allows them to diversify what they're doing. So they're generating income on different time horizons, which I like. But also the health and productivity of both animals and plants improves. So the cost of doing it is actually far less than the solar, like much less than the solar. So we're looking at $42 billion, but the savings from doing it is $700 billion.
And that's all through the diversification thing. So crops failing for a farmer, or not crops failing, but maybe foot and mouth wipes out their livestock. They've still got the mushrooms, the nuts, the fruit from the trees. So that's a big thing. If
I hadn't had notes, then I definitely wouldn't have known what silver pasture is. And I don't think it was a million miles away from what you were talking about.
Yeah.
Slightly different.
So different.
But,
It's weird, there's loads of things on this list where you're like, oh, wow, I really hadn't thought of that.
I'm surprised that silver
that's
pasture,
what they found.
a word I'd never heard of, is ninth on the list.
So, yeah, where this other thing I'm talking about, basically, where humans kind of killed off large herds of wild animals, that accelerated the desertification process. So what they're trying to do is they're trying to mimic him with livestock, so i.e. what the buffalo or the herds used to do.
I love the way you're just playing through with this.
Yeah.
Should we go on to the next one?
Let's go on to the next one.
Because maybe the one you're talking about is going to come in the top 10. It's going to come higher than 8th. It's unlikely. Right, number 8. So the eighth sort of best thing that we could do is solar farms. So much like solar PV on roofs, these are the massive collections of, the massive solar arrays where you've got hundreds of thousands of solar panels potentially in the same place. And they are, when they're that dense, they're beginning to produce proper power. And I think that's the general kind of picture of it. I'm going to let Harry explain the net cost of this one because I'm excited about it.
Okay. Is that because the net cost is a minus?
Yes.
Okay, so that's again because of the falling cost of solar versus
nuclear.
Not even versus nuclear, versus other forms of energy that may be available.
Okay.
So their estimation on Project Drawdown is that it will save a lot of money. It won't cost any money.
I'm not laughing at you, I'm just looking at Nick who's still going back to number 8. No, I'm
not
trying to get the name of what it was called.
No, I'm not. It will all make sense at the end of the podcast.
It was fun. Okay, good.
So this is one that shouldn't, theoretically, over the next 20 to 30 years, won't cost us anything and could, save us 80.6 billion. And then with a net saving of 5 trillion.
So very good, but the actual carbon bit, which I think is what the top 10 is based in,
it
reckons 37 giga. Yeah, giga or
Yes.
jigger?
Jigger.
Oh, I'm going bigger. Like a GIF, not a GIF.
No, it's giga. It's
Yeah.
definitely like gigabyte. It's definitely giga. 37 gigatons. Yeah,
Of CO2
gigaton is massive.
Yeah.
Of CO2.
An interesting thing about that, so you can read, Project Drawdown's really great because you can read all about their methodology on everything. The methodology on that one is interesting. They assume that there's going to be a learning rate of 19.2% over the next 31 years. Now, to me, I haven't drilled down all the way far into it, but seems to me like they're counting on a lot of development of the technology.
Having seen that guy fly over the channel on a hoverboard, all of these things now seem possible in my mind. 19.2% seems relatively sort of unambitious.
They think that, I mean, all of the numbers they use they say are very conservative. I think it's maybe, I don't know.
Right, number 7. Far away, Nick.
6 and 7 together.
6 and 7.
I think it's a little bit controversial. So it's talking about educating girls and family planning in the developing countries.
Well, it makes sense. So
Population control.
Actually,
is-
it's not just developing countries, it's global.
Everyone.
They want. Yeah.
But it is very much population control. So how many people live in the world at the moment? 8
About
billion.
8.5 billion.
And so obviously if we can curb that, not as in we've got to take it down drastically, but then you're going to...
I kind of disagree with that anyway, because I think by the nature of it, every year, every decade, the world is getting more affluent, and as people come out of poverty, it was just people tend to,
No, but that doesn't make sense, because over here, so as someone who lives in the UK, you are producing more carbon dioxide, or greenhouse gases, than someone in the developing world potentially. Just because of the very nature of, we have homes that need to be heated, and we all drive cars, you know what I mean? Whereas if you're not driving a car, if you're not doing this sort of stuff, then obviously that's not the case.
I mean, there's 225 million women in lower income countries that have said that they want the ability to choose their whether they have children or not, but they lack the access to contraception and also to education. The reason that this is 0.6 and 7 together, basically what they did, they said that the two are so inextricably linked, educating women and family planning, that they couldn't pick apart like where to stop. So in the ranking, they've literally just taken the carbon and split it down the middle.
But the carbon savings of that, they reckon it's over 100 gigatons of carbon dioxide.
Yeah,
right? Or
so they put
carbon
it as
dioxide
51
equivalent.
each. Yeah.
But that is plenty. I mean, that is seriously big numbers.
If it was 1 point, that would be at the top of the list.
Yeah. So as controversial as it is, I mean, the numbers are big, and they can't put costs on it. They don't know what the savings would be. I'm assuming because the numbers would be too big.
Yeah. I mean, it's too variable, and also, obviously a big part of it is low-income countries where you're much less likely to have access to contraception and things. But I mean, it's not only that. I mean, look at the American South. In the US, about 45% of pregnancies are unintended.
That is unbelievable. Is that true?
That's from the Project Drawdown website. That's the statistics.
45% of pregnancies in the US are unintended.
That doesn't necessarily mean they're unwanted, but it means they're not planned.
But that's not a whole of the United States, as you said. Actually, certain states, right?
That's US.
The whole of US.
Well, yeah.
Including...
Well, we can link to the statistic for that, but yeah.
Okay, right.
I just think people have lots of children in the developing world just because of poor access to medication and kind of clean amenities. So there's a lot more fatalities, and people generally have bigger family sizes because most people, because of those factors and access to food, don't make it till old age. So
disagreed.
So people have bigger families. So when you grow older, you want culturally people look after the parents.
I'm going to disagree on that.
Yeah, I'm going to disagree on that one as well. This is a good one.
I don't really like this point, but
okay, fine. So we need to jump on to the next point. So this is actually a really easy one to get. So tropical forests, right? So back in the day, well, not back in the day, not that long ago, before we came along, essentially, before humans came along, tropical forests covered about 12% of land mass, and now they cover just 5%. And that is basically because obviously we need places to live and we are working the land harder, and crops are more valuable than random forests and trees and that sort of thing. And so obviously when you have a tree, as it's growing, it absorbs carbon dioxide, it locks that in, it uses that carbon dioxide in photosynthesis, creates energy, etc., and the plant grows, and so it's locking in that carbon dioxide. So as soon as you cut those trees down, number one, you tend to then burn the tree, releasing that carbon dioxide back into the atmosphere, but obviously that tree no longer exists to absorb any other carbon dioxide. So it's kind of like a double whammy, that one. So it's a really obvious one, that one, I think. And I think the palm oil thing kind of flows into this. So I'm just taking this one and run with it. But like palm oil is, I don't know why it's suddenly become so popular, but it's it basically the farmers get paid obviously to take down trees and plant big palm oil plantations, and it's causing massive issues, and it goes into everything, and it's a real issue, and I think we need to try and stop using that if we can. But there we go.
So according to statistics, 61.23 gigatons of CO2 emissions saved by 2050 if we enacted that point.
That's basically if we took of the 751 million acres that are estimated could be restored of degraded land in the tropics. If we were to reinvigorate 60% of that, then that's how we'd get to that figure.
I thought in England we're quite good at replanting trees.
We are, but we don't have tropical forests here, apart from in Kew Gardens.
It all helps.
No, I know what you mean though. Like, I completely agree with you, but I feel that we just don't have very much sort of natural forests.
Yeah.
We do, but not when you compare it to like rainforests and stuff, because they are serious acreage of trees.
And also better at storing carbon, I think, because they aerate the soil better, don't they?
Exactly. Do you want to go number 4?
A plant-rich diet, James. That's going to reduce our CO2 emissions.
Okay.
So I know how much you like meat. So basically, what this point says, we might have to cut down our habits. So whether we just
the chicken kebab we just have for lunch.
Enjoy for lunch, that would be a no-no.
Okay, this is a really good fact. I like this one. If you're going to take one thing from today, if cattle were their own nation, they'd be the world's 3rd largest emitter of greenhouse gases. I think that's a good fact.
But they wouldn't have very good society.
They wouldn't have great society. Well,
maybe they would.
Maybe they would. And this is now bandied around a huge amount, and I think the government are actually trying to pull together a bit of a paper. As I said on Radio 4 this morning. I don't often listen to Radio 4, so when I do, I have to tell people about it. But they were talking about there's a study at the moment. The government are looking to advise people on to increase the amount of plants and vegetables in their diets.
Well, we talk about it quite a lot in our office, actually.
We do.
As you both know, I'm a vegetarian.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Oh, really? I never talk about it.
Yeah.
Somewhere down the line there will definitely be a food-based podcast where I get you guys to try some tofu and probably to make you cry.
I actually don't have a problem with it. No.
I have a problem with tofu.
I have a problem with tofu. But my main issue, right, is so I once, this sounds so bad, I'm 36, but anyway, I had a month of eating no meat, right? So I just had a vegetarian diet. It takes so long to cook a vegetarian meal that tastes of anything.
No, you're doing it wrong.
Because I've got veg, like I really like veg. Yeah, but then I also like the protein, the meat.
I think that it's very difficult for people to get out of a mindset, especially here in the UK where it's meat and 2 veg. That's the thing. And so when you make a meal, you start with the meat and then you kind of add the vegetables around it and you add the other stuff around it. But your central thing is always the protein. So I think it's hard to get people to kind of think about food in a different way. and you know, to teach people to cook in different ways. But certainly in terms of what personally we can do for climate change, it's one of the biggest things a person can do is.
Maybe we'll have a podcast and we'll do
people
this
used
in
to
more
eat,
detail.
People used to eat less meat before 50 years ago, you know, before it was so mass produced.
I watched a programme about the African diet compared to the European diet, and it was a bit gross, but they kind of brought on the equivalents of how big your poo would be essentially in a year. Like they just wheeled it in. And the African diet, because there's so much more vegetable in it, the pile was about 4 times bigger, about 5 times bigger than the European diet. They don't have, or their occurrence of colon cancer in Africa, because of a result of the increased vegetables in their diet, is tiny in comparison with the European diet. So it is obviously, it has to be better for you.
Depends what part of Africa, yeah, I suppose.
Well, obviously, but I'm just going European and African. I'm not kind of going to too much.
No, because I was going to say, so if you are a cattle farmer in Africa and you are near some of the deserts, you have to rely on
You're going back to, aren't you?
No, I'm just saying they have to, just because it's harder for them to grow vegetables en masse, so they have to rely on kind of animal produce.
Yeah,
as
true.
part of the daily diet. So it depends, James. Depends what part of it.
But so that is 66 gigatons of carbon dioxide or equivalent reduced by 2050 if we were to switch to this plant-rich diet.
If 50% of people were to do it in the world.
50%, sorry.
So this is interesting. So it's saying here, basically we've got to get down to 2,500 calories a day.
If 50% of the world's population restricted their diet to 2,500 calories a day, meat free, then we could, that's basically how we get
That's 2,500 calories, quite a lot anyway.
I think that's what you fellas just ate with the kebabs.
No, that may well be the case.
I think it was the chips. It wasn't the meat.
Let's move on. Okay, so number 3, top 3.
Number 3 is, spot on.
Go on then.
Reducing food waste.
Tell me about it.
Well, so I always get it in terms of what I don't understand is, the supermarkets.
Yeah.
So when something is reached its sell-by date, or it's on its sell-by date, they just chuck it all away?
Yeah. Well, they put it on the cheap aisle. Which is where you will find
that's when it's on its last day, though. Day after.
That's where you'll find me.
So, which is it's a good thing, yeah. So because you're kind of stopping, going on to
save the planet,
waste and stuff like that. But surely there's use by date and when it's goodbye.
Yeah, but they're weird. So I agree with that. But then, so obviously, if someone's got proper mould on, apart from bread, I wouldn't eat it.
My favourite quote from my mum is, "Harry, if it's 90% mould, it's still 10% food." That woman does not like throwing food away.
But it's good. But I wouldn't. So if an egg had passed its sell-by date, I would eat it.
But bread, if it's got a bit of mould, I'd cut it.
Yeah, get rid of it. No,
Agree. There's a way to test eggs though to see if they're past it. If you put them in water, I think if they float, then they're off.
I think we should probably confirm that.
Yeah.
Because we kill
some rotten eggs
everyone.
and get the podcast out.
Everyone's got salmonella. But tell me more. Tell me more about reduce food waste.
Basically it says a third of all the food that comes from farms or is prepared does not ever make it to our bellies, I suppose.
Yeah.
So it gets wasted. So that's a lot of waste.
Yeah. I was so I live in Ealing, and I was walking through Ealing the other day. This is quite a boring story, but they have like a little farmers market every Saturday, and they bring in shed loads of fruit, right? And it's really cheap. And I always wonder what happens with all the fruit that they don't sell at the end of it, because they're going to go home. They can't make like massive margins, and so they go home with just boxes and boxes of fruit with no value.
But then if like your local farmer was to throw away a box of strawberries, is that as bad as a box of strawberries that isn't thrown away but that came from Spain and got flown?
There's definitely things like that.
It's I don't know the answer to that, but presumably.
No, I agree. I think, and that's why you're trying to grow things locally, I guess, for your local, population. which could make things after Brexit very interesting. But we shall see on that one. But I think with a lot of it, so fruits and that sort of thing, and I don't know, this may not be true, so I'll probably get in trouble. But I think the innocent smoothies used to go round the supermarkets. This may or may not be true, but I think it sounds right. Innocent smoothies used to go round. This is before they were bought by Coke. They go around and they bought all the fruit that was about to go off, and it was because it's about to go off. It's exceptionally sweet. And so that is how they make their smoothies. So they're taking a waste product from all the supermarkets, and they take it very quickly from these supermarkets to their factories, and they basically turn it into these smoothies on the kind of last day that it would actually be normally viable, and you suddenly have an incredibly sweet smoothie that's very popular, and it's a really good idea. It's the same thing with taking it's not the same thing, but the sandwich shops in London, give all their sandwiches to homeless people and stuff at the end of the day instead of just chucking it all away.
So another interesting point here is a distinction between wastage in developing countries, so i.e., the Western Hemisphere, so be us and the States and the rest of Europe, places like Japan, to developing countries. So I guess places in Asia, Africa, South America, which probably there's a lot more kind of agricultural people actually grow the food that they consume.
Yeah.
Whereas our food market is all about kind of mass consumption, supermarkets. So
I think it's also about kind of facilities. So here, if you're transporting, or specifically on mainland Europe or something, if you've got a truck that's going 500 kilometers full of fruit and veg, then it's probably chilled. It's probably easy to refuel, it's blah blah blah. Whereas in maybe a hotter country with less infrastructure and maybe less availability of these kind of expensive refrigeration transport networks, then you're going to find food spoiling a lot faster, even though these countries tend to be a lot bigger and have a lot more ground to cover. So basically you're fighting against time in a way there that I think we are doing less here. So there's more wastage in the supermarkets and the consumer end here, but there maybe in the earlier stages.
Yeah, makes sense.
But also probably things like fertilizer and stuff and preservatives are probably too expensive for some of the poorest countries, so they have to, as it comes out of the ground, they've got to consume it there and then.
Right.
I think the other thing that we have here that, again, I'm talking more developed countries, is that we like our fruit and our vegetables presented in a certain way. And so if your tomato isn't round, it's like a weird shape. Which
if the banana's not, what is it? What was the EU ruling a few years ago? So if it was straight or was it curved?
But this is it. So on my veg patch, when it suddenly rains, all the tomatoes swell a little bit and they split. And it's still a tomato. It tastes
vegetables
like tomato.
That you grow at home are not a thing of beauty, but the ones in the supermarkets are always perfect.
Yeah, and so I think we just also need to get over that and.
But the other thing about the food waste thing is that the number that they came up with on the project, just over a third of it, I think, is to do with actual direct food waste. So if we could cut that in half, is their kind of ambition, and would make a massive difference. But the other thing that would make a massive difference is reducing deforestation, because we don't have to grow as much. And deforestation is just such a huge thing. And so if we can pull that back...
Yeah, no, agreed. So if we were to reduce... 50% of food waste was reduced by 2050. We'd avoid emissions equal to 25, 26 gigatons of carbon dioxide. But they reckon... So this is number 3 on our list here. And they reckon that if we can sort this out, it's about 71... gigatons of carbon dioxide equivalent by 2050.
And that's an amalgamation of the food wastage problems and also the deforestation.
So number 2. So this is another it's another power one. It's related to replacement electricity.
The reason I've got a massive smile is it's talking about onshore wind.
Okay, can't tell me about it.
Well, it's just although we do have onshore wind turbines in the UK, I can't see them, populating the countryside up and down the land.
I can. I did big time
because of the sentiment.
Just before we get onto onshore wind, can you guess, James, don't look, I know you've got it in front of you. Can you guess where on the list offshore wind is?
Oh,
Is it between 10 and 20?
the cost, no, it's not going to be right down because the cost is so expensive to get it installed.
22. It's 22nd on the list, but onshore is second, which I think is very interesting, especially in the UK, given how much we're putting into offshore here. Obviously, this is a global thing, and we're talking locally when we're talking about the UK, in general terms.
But they're looking at the investment so much bigger. So if you're looking at, and I guess it makes sense, like having a wind turbine in the middle of the Atlantic isn't going to work. But they're looking at investment for wind turbines offshore by 2050 is 545 billion, whereas they're looking 1.225 trillion for wind turbines onshore. So it's essentially 2.5 times more investment.
Yeah.
Which makes sense because it's easier to get to turbines onshore.
Mm-hmm.
I know you're not sure about onshore wind turbines.
Right.
But are you not sure about them?
Well,
are you not sure about them in a UK context, or are you not sure about them in a global context?
Well, globally, it's not going to be very windy in lots of places around the world, particularly if you're got a continental climate. So again, whether it's onshore or offshore wind, it's going to have to be countries, I think, that have a maritime type climate where you can have, well, not predictable wind, but at least it's going to be at a sort of predictable season, or it's going to be a certain amount of wind.
Yes.
That's influenced
well, you don't
by
want to put a wind turbine the wind never blows.
Yeah, so like, I don't know, middle of, it's probably going to be a terrible example. Somewhere like Central Asia, desert somewhere in the middle of nowhere where it's like not windy at all. It just wouldn't work. So it has to be your word, the topography and the weather and the.
We still strictly don't know what topography means.
Yeah,
it sort of just seems to suit.
Yeah, okay.
It's crept into our language, our daily language.
But they reckon that if we keep going at our current rate, the onshore wind will be the cheapest way to produce electricity within 10 years, which is awesome. And I think
but it's intermittent, so all these figures are assuming a certain amount of wind blowing over the next 35 years or 30
of
years.
course, yeah, but we're hoping the wind's going to keep blowing.
Yeah.
Whether or not we'll be around to see it.
Yeah, we might not be around, but anyway. So the cost is massive, right? So it's $1.25 trillion dollars, but the savings are $7.5 trillion dollars. So when we're looking at the rooftop solar, the kind of the commercial solar, the numbers are a fraction of the size. And so as a result, wind turbines produce more power, etc., just because there's more of them. And so we're looking at 85 gigatons of carbon dioxide equivalent by 2050 reduced if we plough on with the wind turbines, which is impressive. Mm-hmm. So wind turbines are biggie. So number one, what is it? This surprised me.
Is it refrigerant or refrigeration management, or either?
Refrigerant
management. Is that the correct?
Yeah.
So.
I'd say yeah.
So it's got here in materials. So it's how we utilize refrigeration and the kind of inputs into how we make the machinery, the infrastructure. Yeah.
So in the project they split all the different the 100 different things they came up with. They split them into 8 different categories, and one of the categories is materials.
Do they still use CFCs and stuff in? Because it says old style. I know that hasn't been around for like 20 years in refrigerators and stuff like that. So that's one thing that we did in the 90s to really reduce.
Yeah, we did, and it made a massive difference. But they were replaced by HFCs.
Yeah, so basically in Montreal in the late 80s, a bunch of countries came together. They had a thing called the Montreal Protocol, where basically they all said CFCs, which, James, remind me what that actually means, the chlorofluorocarbon. Which I think we all have heard from our science class. They destroyed the ozone layer. CFCs. So all these countries came together, said, okay, let's get rid of that, and let's not do that anymore. However, then, so in the 90s, they start replacing it with HFCs. which I think is hydrofluorocorbins, probably not corbins, which don't harm the ozone, but can warm the atmosphere by 1,000 to 9,000 times more than CO2. Yeah.
Well, and I think carbon monoxide.
That's the poisonous one.
No, I know it's the poisonous one, but I think in the same token as this, warming the atmosphere at such a much higher rate than carbon dioxide. I think carbon monoxide does it. One of the really nasty gases that comes out the back of cars, and I can't remember, is
nitrogen
oxide.
Yeah.
Is much worse than carbon dioxide. You use a tiny proportion of it, and it does a much bigger.
That's why you have AdBlue, James.
Bloody AdBlue. So that's the plan. So what we're trying to do, and I think we're trying to phase out.
Yeah, so again, it was
HFCs.
another important kind of meeting. So in Rwanda, in a place called Kigali, everybody came together in 2016 when kind of climate change was starting to get a bit, sexy and jazzy.
Not in America.
170 countries came together and they amended that thing from the late 80s. And they basically said, okay, well now we need to get rid of HFCs, which are these ones with the terrible chemical output.
You always wonder why we didn't. We don't have to do these bloody stepping stones all the time, don't we? So we've got one really bad one, CFCs, and then we have to go halfway house HFCs to something half decent.
But I mean, is it half decent? It's surely.
No, HFCs aren't.
So solving a problem with a problem.
So, yes. Harry, here's a controversial question for you, and I just want to know your view on it. Do you think we are, if you had to choose, if you had to sort of, choose. So, do you think we are making more harm with plastics and waste in the environment, or through warming through greenhouse gases and global warming? What do you think's immediately worse for us?
I think that first of all, I think that the two are inextricably linked, just because of the environmental impact of both, and also they go hand in hand. Plastic reduction is very harmful. And plastic waste is harmful, blah, blah, blah. In terms of the most immediate danger, I do think that climate change is reaching, we hear every week there's a news story that it's like, we're past the tipping point. The tipping point is, they keep talking in the news about this kind of, the point of no return for climate change. Yeah. I also think that something's being done about plastic in a faster way than it is about climate change, because with energy systems, you build a new energy power station, no matter what it is, it's going to take a number of years to build. And, if we're saying we've only got a limited amount of time, it's not like there's 10 years left until blah, blah, blah. It's like there's 10 years left, so we need to do it now. Mm-hmm. So that's what I would say.
I think it's the waste of plastics.
You didn't ask me my comments.
And what's your view?
I think that we will... So plastics will be phased out really, really quickly. Right, and they will be, but they will just be replaced with plastic equivalents made from things like algae. So we will still have them, but they will just, the way they're built, the way they're made is going to be slightly different, and therefore it will be considered cleaner, but potentially it won't be in the long run. That would be my thoughts.
I think that there's a lot more strides being made, specifically here in the UK, with replacing single-use plastics than there are with changing climate change.
So we do online shopping, and obviously everything suddenly arrives at once, right? And you get out and you put it in fruit bowls and all that sort of stuff. It's unbelievable the amount of packaging that stuff comes with. And also, you may have noticed, my wife has an addiction to Amazon.
No, I'm saying
Amazon's really bad.
It's difficult to avoid it, just because everything relies on single-use plastic.
But someone eventually in a supermarket will do it and make a killing from it, because I think it will appeal to a huge demographic. They will say, right, we are from this day forth not going to bother with single-use plastic at all. And if you want to sell into a big supermarket, because everyone is desperate to sell into a big supermarket, because then you've suddenly made it. Because instead of selling to two tiny little shops, you've gone into one of the big brands. You've automatically suddenly got a massive reach. they will be forced to adjust. They will be forced to do it.
That's happening. Iceland's made that promise that they'll be.
So if I walk into Iceland and go and buy a frozen pizza, that frozen pizza won't be in a cardboard box and with single-use plastic.
That's what they said. I can't remember when their target is, but I think it's fairly soon.
Iceland, don't we?
Well, I just think it's rubbish.
Yeah, I know.
It's all good and well to say it, but you actually have to do it. And I think a huge amount of people would say, okay, I'm in. I think
places are doing it. Waitrose, I had a ready meal from there the other day, cardboard container in the ready meal.
Yeah.
Instead of plastic, they've got loads of
But it's gradual, right?
It is gradual, but
so,
I think it's
so if you just
faster.
we're not taking them anymore, as of next week. Because they did, the plastic bag ban, which is, it was just brilliant in its simplicity. Just tax people.
90% reduction since they put in the 5p.
Just tax people.
Yeah.
Because people don't like paying for stuff. And you don't have to take a bag.
I don't even think it's people don't like paying for stuff. I think it's just there's that reminder. I think there's that oh damn, should have brought a bag. It puts it in your head.
Well, suddenly you're embarrassed.
Suddenly not thoughtless.
Yeah. And I think that's the kind of thing that. And I don't want to tax people to encourage people to do stuff because I think that's ridiculous. I think it is all about free markets. But sometimes there's a subtle nudge. And I think 5p was obviously enough to nudge most people not to bother. But if you really need one, it's not going to.
The other thing is, in our local Waitrose, if you go there and you haven't taken your own plastic bag, they don't have them out anymore. You have to ask the lady for one, and she'll be like, "Yeah, that's no problem," but you still feel like a bit of a knob.
Well, we go to Costa Coffee in the morning, right? And I'm sure they're not good for the environment. But anyway, we have these little mugs that you take in. So when we walk the dog, who is fast asleep and has been a little angel. Anyway, when we take him in the morning, you go and you get a filter coffee and you get 50p off it with your mug, your reusable mug. And so actually, you've got a half decent coffee for 50p. It's really easy.
Yeah. And
you're going to judge me on my cheap coffee drinking habits.
When I drive to work and I fill at a Waitrose / Shell petrol station, here's the irony, you can't get a single-use cup to use their coffee machines. You've got to bring your own recyclable cup.
That's good.
Or spend 50p for a recyclable cup.
And that's it. If you don't give people a choice, then obviously and then they'll fuss like everyone always does, and then give it a week and no one will remember.
Well, it's like the fridges. Going back to the fridges, this year is the year that you can't get them, the HFC ones anymore in high income countries that were defined in the Rwandan Accord. But low income countries are either 2024 or 2028, depending on various different things. For the overall ban of HFC.
So I think we can revisit some of this. I think the issue is we've now been on about 50 minutes, so we've gone over where we'd normally be. Refrigerant management, if we sorted it out, could get it down by 90 gigatons, right? So that is really, really big numbers. So that is number one. So there we go. It's a random one. I didn't think that would appear. I thought it would be.
Build a larder, yeah.
Yeah, I thought it would be. I thought the vegetable diet would be a massive one. I thought moving to sort of greener energy sources.
Do you know? I thought it would be a lot higher up.
What?
Nuclear power.
Nuclear power is
high
20.
up, but it's not in the top 10.
Yeah.
I thought that developing battery storage. You and I always talk about that. I thought that would be higher, but I don't know if it's just not quantifiable.
I thought electric cars potentially, because a third of our CO2 emissions.
But then an electric car is only as good as the source of the electricity.
Right.
So it's quite hard to quantify.
And on that point, on that bombshell.
Don't Top Gear us.
No, we were going to do some news. We haven't got time, so you're not getting any, basically.
It has been much kind of in the. I think it's just all everyone's.
No, there is.
We'll chat about the news next week.
So thank you very much, Nick. Harry.
Thank you.
And Rufus, being such a good boy. And we will see you soon.